This next presentation is brought to you by the summit's exclusive diamond sponsor, CrowdStrike. In this session, you will learn why cybersecurity is a critical priority for businesses to thrive and win in the age of the never normal. Fabio Fratucello, the speaker of this session, is a technology and security guru with 25 years of international experience working for private companies and large multinationals in a variety of management, technical, and advisory roles. In his current role with CrowdStrike, Fabio is also responsible for developing and executing CrowdStrike's regional technology roadmap and helping customers develop cyber defense strategies, managing their cyber risks, and achieving success in their cyber journey. Guys, here is Fabio Fratucello, Chief Technology Officer of CrowdStrike's Asia Pacific and Japan.
We make history. Every day, 2.5 quintillion bytes. We draw from our instincts, creating moments that tell the world that this is who we are, who we've always been. We adapt to decide close calls, a breakthrough that takes a nanosecond to experience and a generation to manifest. This is our collective history. Together, it's ours to protect. For new histories to be written, new records shattered, new legacies forged. That's the power of we. CrowdStrike. We stop breaches.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Fabio Fratucello, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the APJ region at CrowdStrike, where I do work on technology strategy. My background is in cyber defense strategy and specifically in the detection and response domain, where I spent my last 25 years working on some of the largest financial organizations around the globe. But for today, I'm not going to focus on the more gloom and doom side of security, nor I'm going to go into very technical details, because today I'll be focusing on thriving and winning in the age of the never normal. And so in today's session, I'll be looking at discussing what are the challenges that security leaders are faced with when try elevating security as a business priority and as an enabler. What does true security transformation mean? And how do we start with a security-first approach to thrive and win in the age of the never normal? So let's get started. Let's start from the challenges and how security is currently perceived. The reality of today's modern society is that complexity in the enterprise keeps on increasing. The external environment is changing at speed, with some of the external forces exerting pressure on organizations and security leaders. And so we will be exploring some of the dependencies between the external landscape and the internal challenges, and what are the opportunities to drive a security transformation. Let's start from the external challenges. And I want to start with the threat landscape. You probably heard this before. The threat landscape is escalating, becoming more sophisticated. Cyber attacks are becoming more complex and disruptive, and threat actors are evolving their techniques. And we need to find a way to stop and deal with it from a cyber defensive standpoint. The second challenge is around enterprise networks. They're becoming bigger and they're becoming more complex. And now this was true even before the pandemic. If we just think a couple of years ago, probably many organizations would have already started a cloud journey where we were moving workloads from on-prem into the cloud. And maybe you already started a workforce transformation where instead of having your people, your teams working into the office, they were working from home. But we all know what happened as part of the pandemic and how this pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation around cloud and remote capability. And so today, it's not uncommon to come up with organizations that have a cloud and remote first strategy that is very well aligned and defined to their business objective and to their technology direction. The last point is around vulnerabilities. Now, if you are a security professional, you're probably aware that vulnerabilities has been a challenge for quite some time. In this vulnerability management space, security professional has been used to having to deal with a monthly patching cycle where vulnerabilities are identified and remediated on a monthly basis. But as we progress, critical vulnerabilities are getting discovered more often that are impacting the core technology stack of the organization. And so these vulnerabilities are now getting discovered every week, maybe more often. And so depending on your organization, your industry segment, and your risk profile, you might on a daily basis. Now, let's look at the internal challenges. The first one is around security, which too often is an afterthought and it is underfunded. And I mentioned before, organizations are operating in an environment where the threat landscape is continuously escalating, threat groups are innovating and looking at advancing their offensive capabilities. Organizations that do not provide their security functions with appropriate funding become ineffective very quickly as the threat landscape evolves. And security leaders, we need to be able to establish trust and relationship at the appropriate level. And we need to be able to get the right attention to the real issue that we want to get tackled. And I personally think that as an industry, we've made some progress in raising awareness, but there is more that we need and have to do. This year in 2021, the World Economic Forum, through their Global Risk Report, has highlighted cyber risk as a global risk. Let's reflect on this for a moment. How many security leaders are having regular conversation with their boards on cyber risks and how these risks may impact the business? And so it's really important that as security leaders of tomorrow, we're able to elevate the conversation and make sure cybersecurity is a regular topic for discussion at the board level. The second challenge is what I call the external control. Security has been historically seen or implemented as an external security control. And rather than working together with the business and baking security early on, the external control approach has caused security teams to be seen as adding frictions, adding delays, and becoming the no department to business ideas. Now, this issue has been aggravated by the quality of legacy security products, which were designed to be reactive to threats. These legacy products not only fail to deliver on the promise of protecting organizations, but has also introduced further complexity and unnecessary load on the compute, which ultimately has created additional overhead to the user. And because of this, security products has been historically the target of criticism by the end users, feeling security was preventing them from doing their job. And a great example of this would be, you probably recall the bad experience with legacy AV software. They were taking a significant amount of time, system resources, creating painful log system boot times, and sometimes they brought down the entire system during intensive AV scanning. Now, the third challenge is around finding the right balance between being reactive versus being strategic. And we know threat actors are embracing new technology, they're innovating at scale, but they're also doing this at a very fast pace. And because of that, security leaders are required to operate with a similar tempo and have to place significant focus on detecting, preventing, and responding to threats. There is a lot of operational effort that is reactive by its nature. However, leaders that want to be successful are also required to ensure security is thought from a strategic perspective. And so instead of asking, how do we not get breached? They should be asking, how do we address security long term? And while the operational and reactive aspect cannot be ignored, security professionals could do more to align security with the rest of the business. Because ultimately, this will lead to have security is a key element enabling business operation rather than being just a cost. So we spoke about the cyber environment and how organizations are operating. We've also talked about what challenges security leaders have faced and some of the historical reasons for those challenges. Now, let's shift gear and discuss how can the perception of security be changed and what is needed to drive a positive security transformation within the organization. And I tried to summarize this concept with just one slide and with a few words. And to me, this is all about elevating security as a business priority. Now, I want to share a couple of themes on security transformation. And of course, by no means, this is not a complete list. I believe there are likely to be several other themes that you can use to drive a positive security transformation. And I encourage you to do so. As security leaders, you are in the best position to know what is of relevance for your own organization, which should be based on your risk profile and based on where you are in your cyber journey. But there's a reason why I selected these two themes. And the reason is because these two themes are likely to be applicable to a very large number of organizations. And so these two themes are enabling a remote workforce and DevSecOps. Let's start with the first one. We spoke before about organizations becoming bigger and more complex, but also becoming cloud and remote first. And as part of this transformation, security now has the opportunity to be a business enabler and facilitate the transition of the remote workforce. This transformation is about rapidly shifting the workforce from working into the office, which in security terms we call from inside the perimeter, to working from anywhere at any time. And if we want to be successful in enabling such shift, the security approach has to change from focusing on traditional on-prem perimeter security controls to what is a more modern cloud native approach. Let's think about it. The perimeter is no longer there. So the controls that were established at this layer are now less relevant and are partially effective. And so because of this, there has to be a heavy reliance on protecting the identity and apply concepts like zero trust to close the new gaps. We've also previously discussed around how security may have a reputation as an inhibitor due to a negative trade-off associated with older technologies or older techniques. And so today's security transformation can take advantage of the more modern approaches that provide enhanced security benefit without many of the previous inhibitors. Now, the second one, DevSecOps. DevSecOps, in my opinion, is another area where there is a tremendous opportunity to change perception on security. This is about the adoption of IT and development practice that integrate security into their design as a core foundational requirement, rather than being added in as an afterthought, as we said before. And so this is about baking in security from the start of every business initiatives. With this transformation, there is an opportunity to create or enhance relationship between the security teams and the products and the business teams. This transformation may allow security leaders to be seen as enabling business to reduce risk and deliver new initiative without the concern of having potential breaches down the road, which is very powerful. The early security is integrated into the development cycle, the better. We also spoke before about the vulnerability problem. Having systems up and running in production with vulnerabilities that, when exploited, can cripple your organization. And with DevSecOps, by baking security early on, we now have the opportunity to assess if those workloads are affected by vulnerabilities before they are deployed into production. And so security products can finally be seen as essential enablers of business agility and working together with the development, with the operation practice at their velocity, creating what is called DevSecOps. Now, I'm getting close to the end of my presentation. Let's talk about the security first approach. And I want to share some of the practical tips to start on this journey. And so what are some of the tips around how to start a security first adoption? There are three on the screen. Shifting thinking from security as a cost to a saving, integrate security practice from the beginning, and lastly, enable the business instead of crippling the user. Let's talk a little bit more about those. The first one is around the shifting thinking from security as a cost to a saving. And the saving could be in form of reduced downtime. It could be around decreasing business interruption, or it could be around enabling long-term protection for the brands and the customer relationships. And so when we're articulating saving concepts, it's important that we use the language that resonates well and it is familiar with non-security people. And so I had the pleasure and opportunity to speak with a number of customers in Malaysia and across the region. And what I've noticed is that successful leaders tend to shift the conversation around maturity levels, for example. They talk about what are the targets and what we need to reach to provide the relevant long-term protection to brands and customers. They talk around how we're going to get there. What is the journey? What is the program of work that needs to be funded and required to reach the destination? Those leaders tend to talk about metrics. What is worth measuring and how we're going to measure it. And so it's very important that we understand if we do have security controls or security products that can provide us with the relevant information that we can use to drive objective and meaningful conversation. Remember, what are we going to measure and how we're going to measure it. Those leaders, they also tend to talk about return on investment. And this is more than provide confidence that security funding has been well spent. This is also around demonstrating how through a pragmatic approach to security, we can empower the business to be successful. Let's talk about the second one. Integrate security practice from the beginning. Through the presentation, we talked a little bit about this already. And it is much cheaper and easier to integrate security practice from the beginning rather than a later stage as an afterthought. And a great example to illustrate this point is ransomware. I'm fairly confident many of you are familiar with the term and know what ransomware is. And again, when I often spoken to clients on the ransomware theme, and I often get asked, what is the best strategy against ransomware? And my answer is always the same, which is the best strategy against ransomware is doing the required security work upfront, so there is no ransomware event to handle. Preventing a ransomware from impacting an organization is always cheaper than having to deal with a security incident that has crippled the organization. And so through this approach, not only there are great opportunities to decrease security and IT costs due to their early analysis and integration, but as a byproduct, there is often an opportunity to accelerate IT and digital experimentation and the overall delivery of capabilities to market. And so many organizations, particularly the ones that are operating in our cloud-first organization, they're operating in the cloud environment, are really capitalizing on this approach. So I encouraging, and it's worth reaching out to understand some of the best practices in this space. And lastly, as a security leader, you should always ensure that security recommendations don't cripple day-to-day life of the end user, and also don't add too much friction to the business. Now, security at heart is a risk reduction capability. Security exists to address risks that are outside the organization risk appetite. But at the same time, security also enables and has to accelerate the business when the business is operating within the appropriate guardrails. And so if we look at an example in the prevention, detection, and response space, it's critical to have a security capability that can proactively stop breaches, but at the same time, does not cripple the user with too much overhead. Now remember, good security solution today should be invisible to the end user, and yet they should still providing you with all the actionable information that you need so that your security organization can be effective. Also, let's keep in mind then when we think about enabling the business, and we've discussed this before to an extent when we were talking about being reactive versus being proactive. we need to be critical with our thinking, and particularly around how we're going to enable the business both today and tomorrow. And so it is very important that when we select products or capability, that those fits well with the current technology ecosystem. But more important, if you want to be a successful security leader, if you want to be a business enabler, you need to make sure what you are selecting is going to fit well and be complementary to your organization's future business strategy and technology direction. Now, this brings me to the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I hope it has provided you with some useful insight around the external challenges, the barriers that security leaders may need to overcome internally. But also, more importantly, I hope that you can take some of these tips to start with the security first approach. Because I want you to thrive and win in the age of the never normal. I would love to hear your thought on the topics, so please feel free to connect and reach out to me. My LinkedIn and Twitter details are on the screen. Thanks again for your time. Stay safe and see you next time.
We make history. Every day, 2.5 quintillion bytes. We draw from our instincts, creating moments that tell the world that this is who we are, who we've always been. We adapt to decide close calls, a breakthrough that takes a nanosecond to experience and a generation to manifest. This is our collective history. Together, it's ours to protect. For new histories to be written, new records shattered, new legacies forged. That's the power of we. CrowdStrike. We stop breaches.